Hey there, and welcome back to my channel. This is Elizabeth with Ellie's Handcrafted Jewelry, and today I'm going to be showing you how to create this gorgeous Serene pendant using the new coiled cable weave tutorial that I shared with you last week. I had a few of you reach out and ask how I would use this pattern, and this is the pendant that I came up with. Now this video will show you how to use the coiled cable weave to create the frame, weave a double bail, and how to make a pretty back using all those stray wires that you don't know what to do with. Now just to note, I only used 5 base wires for this project, but you can easily add more if you have a larger stone or like a wider frame. But before we get started, I'd like to thank Kazdance for sponsoring this video. Kazdance is a gem seller located in the United States and has a variety of high quality stones. Search by gemstone, shape, size, quality, and more to find the perfect stone for your project. I've left a link in the description below to their website as well as their Facebook page so that you can stay up to date on any new arrivals or sales. And I'd also like to tell you about my new website where you can sign up for a monthly newsletter detailing new tutorials, videos, and any upcoming projects. You can also find some written tutorials for sale if you prefer working at your own pace, and it helps me to continue creating free tutorials for all of you. I've left the links in the description below, and thank you so much for taking the time to support this channel. Now, let's jump into the tutorial. Now for tools, you're going to need a chain nose pliers, round nose pliers, you're also going to need flush cutters, flat nose pliers if you have them, a spring clamp or a ring clamp, a Sharpie, and blue painter's tape or a scrap piece of paper. And for materials, you're going to need a medium to large teardrop cabochon, 20 gauge round wire, and 28 gauge round wire for weaving. Now to get started, I'm just taking my blue painter's tape, starting here on the top of my gemstone, and I'm going to wrap it clear around the gemstone, like so. And then I'm going to grab a Sharpie and just mark the tops. And one of the reasons I really enjoy using the masking tape versus a piece of paper is it adheres to the stone, so it's a little easier to get more accurate measurements. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put my ruler here and determine where the center of my wire is. And be about right here. And then I'm going to use this to start my weave. And before we get started, I just want to say to check the description box for wire measurements. And I'm just going to feed my weaving wire in between these top 2 base wires and wrap around there at least 2 times. And then I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around the top 2 base wires 2 times. Now I'm just going to bring my weaving wire in between those 2 base wires I just wove together and wrap them 2 times around the next set of 2 base wires. Then I'm going to bring that weaving wire in between those same 2 base wires I just wove together. And then descending down to the next set of base wires, wrapping around 2 times. Then bringing that in between those 2 base wires. And then wrapping around the bottom 2 base wires 2 times. And once I've done that, I'm going to start coiling my wire around the bottom base wire, just wrapping 1 time each around the base wire on the bottom. And I'm going to do this until I've wrapped about 20 times around the bottom base wire. Now once I've wrapped about 20 times around the base wire, I'm going to go ahead and curve this upward, grab my flat nose pliers, and then I'm going to angle this and make the wire parallel with the other base wires. And then we're just going to go ahead and start the weave over again. So wrapping the weaving wire around the top 2 base wires 2 times. And I'm going to bring that wire in between those 2 base wires and down around the next set of base wires. And again, bringing that weaving wire in between those 2 base wires that I wove together, then wrapping around the next 2 base wires. Making sure that you wrap around the correct base wires. And again, bringing that weaving wire in between those two base wires, and again, finally around the bottom two base wires 2 times. And then we're going to start our little coil again. Now once I've coiled my wire, I'm going to go ahead and bring that upward again, creating my little wave. Grab my flat nose pliers and bend that wire to make it parallel with my other base wires. And we'll just do that weave again. And we'll just continue doing that until we reach the other end of our mark. And I'll show you here in the next slide. And you can see we've gone about halfway if we put it here on our masking tape. So now I just need to do the opposite side. Now I'm going to go ahead and start working from the middle towards the opposite side of our frame. And to do that, I'm just separating the wires a little bit, make sure that I can weave them in, and stick my weaving wire in between the what would be the bottom two base wires. It looks like the top here, but it's going to be the bottom. And now I've wrapped 2 times around that bottom base wire, and I'm going to bring my weaving wire around the next 2 base wires 2 times. Then bring my weaving wire in between those 2 base wires. Then I'm going to wrap around the next 2 base wires, so the second and third base wires. And then in between those 2 base wires, then around the third and fourth base wires 2 times. Then in between those 2 base wires. And finally around the top 2 base wires 2 times. Now I'm just going to go ahead and begin coiling here on the top base wire, and I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around it about 20 times to create my coil. Now once I've completed my coil, I'm just going to bend it downward, going the same direction as the previous coils. Grab my flat nose pliers and bend my wire parallel to the rest, and then begin my next weave. Now I'm just wrapping 2 times around each second set of base wires until I reach the top, and then I will do another coil. Now once I've finished with my coil and I've scooted the wire down with my flat nose pliers, I'm going to bend my coiled wire downward, then grabbing my flat nose pliers again to bend that wire back parallel with the other base wires, and I'm going to continue doing this weave until I reach the other side of my mark. Now once I've finished my weave, I'm going to go ahead and cut off any excess weaving wire here at the center. So grabbing my flesh cutters, I'm going to trim that off and then tuck that in. And now I'm just curving my frame upward to create a little teardrop shape so that my stone can sit in there. And just do your time, or just take time and do this at your own pace. Don't want to rush it. And I just need to check where I'm going to be curving my wire here. and just using my fingertips to kind of help create the curve and also making sure that it stays somewhat straight. Just be sure to reference with your stone frequently so you know where the weave is landing and if you need to weave any more. And once we've gotten our frame sorted, I have separated all of the different wires into groups. So we got the 2 here in the center, and then we have 4 groups of 2 base wires separated like this. The 2 centers will be for our base wire, and then the outer 2 for other elements. But for now, we're going to go ahead and start weaving our bale. So I'm bringing these apart a little bit so it'll be a little easier to weave. You'll want to have a nice V shape. Then I'm bringing my weaving wire and wrapping it around one time around that outer base wire. And then wrapping my weaving wire around 2 of the base wires in the back. Then in between those 2 base wires and around. Then we're going to go down and around, creating like a figure 8 weave around the other base wire. Then wrapping around those 2 base wires. Then in between those 2 base wires, then down and around to the other side, then wrapping around that outer base wire one time, then wrapping around those 2 base wires one time, and then bringing that in between those 2 base wires, then down and around to the other side, doing a figure 8 weave. So around that outer base wire one time, then around the 2 base wires, then in between those 2 base wires, and down and around again. Now we're just going to go ahead and continue this weave until we're about an inch along. Now I'm going to go ahead and take these 2 base wires and bend them inward and do the same on the opposite side, kind of creating like a diamond shape. And they don't have to be sharp curves, just something that gives us a little curvature. And then bend them out on the outside. So that way they're a little bit more out of the way for our weaving. And we're just going to go ahead and continue weaving until we reach the end of that diamond shape. Now once I've reached the end, I went ahead and secured that by wrapping it 3 times around one of the base wires. And now we're going to do the second part of our bale, which is the 2 center wires up front. And then grabbing my weaving wire, I'm going to string that on carefully. And wrap that around one of the base wires about 3 times to start the weave. That'll secure the wire. And then when I've done that, I'm going to bring these together as close as I can and keep them as straight as I can. And then I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around both wires one time and just basically coil like I have done in the past, and just coil my weaving wire around both base wires. And just be sure to take your time with this and scrunch the wire down as you go carefully. You want to make sure that there aren't many gaps in your coil when you do this. And we're just going to go ahead and continue coiling until we reach the top of that bale. Now once we've finished our little coil here, we're going to go ahead and secure this to the bale. And I'm going to do this with the weaving wire by straightening out these wires first, and then wrapping my weaving wire around all of these base wires, and then wrapping it around the outer base wire here one time. And then from there, I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around these bottom 2 base wires one time, bring that weaving wire in between them. I'm going to separate these wires a little bit more, wrap the wire around the next 2, then in between those next 2, then around the next 2 base wires, so. Then in between, and then wrap around the next 2 base wires. Bring in between those 2 base wires, and then finally around the outer 2 and around that outer one time. So basically doing the same thing that we did with our bail. And I'm going to scoot these wires down a little bit, and this will be how we secure our bail. At this point, I'm going to grab something round. So in this case, I have my Sharpie here, and I'm going to use this to bend my bail over just a little bit, and then go ahead and squish that a little bit more together. Should be plenty of room for a chain. Now I'm just going to grab my stone and sit in here and make sure that everything is still lining up the way I like it. And now we're going to start working on the back. I got my 3 base wires here on this side, and I'm going to wrap my weaving wire around these outer 2 base wires 2 times. As you can see, I'm directing upward with my weave, so it's going up and around. So now I'm going to do under and around the bottom 2 base wires 2 times. Then bring my weaving wire in between those 2 base wires, and then wrap it around the outer 2 base wires 2 times. And then again underneath and around the bottom 2 base wires 2 times. And I'm going to go ahead and continue this weave until I reach probably halfway down the frame. Now I'm just a little bit before the halfway mark here, and I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit of weaving wire that I can use to secure to the frame. So by doing this, I'm going to create a little, what I'm going to call a bubble. So pull this out a little bit, throw it over my finger like so, and then bend it down. And I'm going to wrap this around the next wires here, so around the bottom 2 base wires 2 times to secure that. Carefully. And then I'm just going to go ahead and continue weaving. And I'll also create another bubble just before I reach the bottom of the frame. All right, now we've gotten to the bottom of the frame. I've created another bubble, and I'm starting to swirl the base wires upward. And I'm just going to leave these 2 base wires here at the bottom. And I'm going to start my lashing weave next. So I'm going to bend that out a little bit, wrap that around the outermost wire, start coiling around it 5 times. And once I've done that, I'm going to wrap the weaving wire around the last 2 bottom base wires here 2 times. So once, then twice, bringing it in between those wires, and then wrapping 5 times around the outer edge again. Now I'm wrapping around those 2 bottom base wires again, and then coiling to finish this off, and then we'll move on to the next step. Now once I finish that side, I've done the opposite side with my little bubbles here, and I've got all the wire curved. And now we're just going to go ahead and turn these downward. And we're going to go ahead and start cutting ends and swirling some wire. So I'm just curving this top wire here inward. I'm going to grab my flush cutters and trim off an end a little bit. And then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers, and I'm going to go ahead and create a little swirl on the end of that. Now just go ahead and curl this other wire downward, creating another curl. Grab my flesh cutters and trim off about 1/4 inch past the frame. Then I'm going to grab my round nose pliers again and create another swirl on the bottom. Now I'm just going to go ahead and touch up that bottom swirl using my chain nose pliers and just make sure that that's curved in a little bit more so that it doesn't catch on anything. Now we're just going to curl the opposite side to mirror the first. Now once we've done that, I'm going to go ahead and curl these other wires downward, and I'm going to trim them off to be really short using my fleshed cutters here, just below the frame. And I'm going to create a tiny little loop with my round nose pliers on the end of this. Now let's do the other side. You'll also notice that I've left quite a bit of weaving wire on the ends of these, so that way I can secure it to the frame. Now I'm just going to go ahead and stick my stone in there and scooch it on up. And from there, I'm going to take these bottom weaving wires and I'm going to use them to secure it to the frame. So I'm going to feed it through the little loop. And then from behind, I'm going to weave it through the bottom of the top, or the bottom of the frame. And I'm going to do the same with the opposite side as well. So that way we can go ahead and start setting our stone. Now we're just going to go ahead and weave this through once, and just so that it holds the stone in place as we work on it, and then we can tighten as we go. So I'm going to grab my flesh cutters and trim all my, or cut all my bubbles open, so that way there are 2 wires that I can use to weave. Make sure that all of them are cut. Now I'm just going to direct this over the back and over the swirl and then back underneath and then up through the frame. That way we can go ahead and secure our swirl to the back as well. And doing the same with the other wire also. Then I'm going to go ahead and take this wire and peek it up through the top of my frame in between the outermost wires. So we'll repeat all these steps, making sure to wrap our weaving wire around our loops to secure them to the back, and then securing them to the frame. and then we will move on to the next step. Now I've secured everything on the back, and I've left these bottom base wires for last because I kind of want them to kind of weave around the outer frame to kind of complete this coiled look. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue weaving that around until that's all finished. Now I've completed the right side for my little accents in the front, and I'm going to show you using the opposite side. And to do this, I'm going to go ahead and make sure that these are somewhat straight. Grab my weaving wire, make sure I have that on hand, but first we're going to start with the innermost wire, and then I'm going to bend it inward, and I'm going to mirror the other side. So just gently curving with my fingers and my thumb, and then curving it outward, making sure that it is equal to the other side as best as I can. Something like that. And then I'm going to curve this inward and create a curl on the end. Now I'm going to grab my flesh cutters and trim them, and then use my round nose pliers to finish up my little swirl on the end. Of course, I think it's a little on the long end, so I'm going to grab my flesh cutters and trim that off a little bit. And then I'm going to grab my chain nose pliers and just kind of squeeze that in at all angles, making sure that I have a nice little swirl on the end. And now that we've finished that wire, I'm going to go ahead and work on the next one. So I'm going to grab my weaving wire and coil it around that wire. And then just going to coil probably an inch, and then I'll scoot it on down to the bottom of the base wire. Now that I've scooted it down a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and continue coiling for a little ways, and then I will start to follow the other wire. Now I've scooched down my wire a little bit, and now I'm just going to follow the previous wire going on the outside of it and begin curling it alongside that bare base wire. Now I'm just going to go ahead and continue coiling a little further and then secure that to my other swirl. Now once I've coiled a little bit more, I'm going to go ahead and follow along the swirl, and then I'm going to take my weaving wire and wrap it around the swirl and the base wire a couple times to secure it. And we're just going to go ahead and continue coiling for a little ways longer and just mirror that other side to create the other swirl. Now we've coiled about another ½ inch. I'm going to go ahead and begin creating my other swirl and just swirling that out towards the outside. And then I'm going to trim that with my flesh cutters and finish off with my round nose pliers. Just make sure that you leave a little bit of a tail end on your weaving wire so that you can secure it to the frame. Now last but not least, we're going to go ahead and feed that tail end of our wire through the top of our frame. And we're going to start by wrapping it around the swirl again and securing it to our frame. Just making sure that everything is nice and even. And we're just going to coil around that frame or that swirl a couple more times just to secure the weave. And here's the finished piece. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you'd like to support my channel, the easiest way to do that is by liking this video and subscribing to my channel. You're also invited to join the Facebook group where you can ask questions, share your work, and learn from others. I've left all the links in the description below, and until next time, happy weaving!